Prologue, Reflections from a Devout Follower. There are nights when I lie completely still, wrapped in the darkness of my room, and surrender myself to prayer. No words are spoken aloud. The silence itself becomes my offering. In those moments, my heart reaches out, not to ask for miracles, not to plead for wealth or success, but simply to hope for a world that doesn't tremble under bombs, to hope for a morning where no child wakes up to the sound of sirens or the sight of crumbling walls. I only wish for one ordinary day, where children can laugh in safety, where a mother can hold her child's hand instead of their photograph framed in mourning black. And yet, every time I awaken with a flicker of hope, the world meets me with the same sorrow. I open my phone, scroll through the headlines, and there it is, another airstrike, another missile screaming through the sky, another city engulfed in fire, another leader condemning another people, declaring them heretics, devils, enemies of God. Each side claims righteousness. Each side calls upon their scriptures. Each side believes they fight for justice, for faith, for salvation. But from where I stand, from the place of a believer without power, without nation, without weapons, I see only suffering. And I begin to wonder, are we, in our devotion, unintentionally waging war in God's name against God Himself? Amidst the ongoing brutal confrontations between Israel and Iran, nations cloaked in layers of politics, military ambition, and national pride, I sense a deeper, more ancient conflict, not just one of weapons, but of belief, not just a clash of soldiers, but a collision of sacred covenants. This is not merely a political struggle, it is a spiritual tension that stretches back millennia, a silent war woven into the very DNA of these lands. It is a confrontation between promises made to prophets, between revelations spoken in deserts, between those who claim to guard the Holy Land and those who believe they were chosen to inherit it, between visions of a Messiah and the unfulfilled hope of peace. I am not a scholar of international relations. I am not a political analyst. I do not belong to any think tank or religious council. I am simply one person among billions, someone who believes in the divine, who believes in mercy, who believes that faith should heal, not divide. And yet I sit here in the quiet of night, asking the same question over and over again. Have we, as a human family, reached a point where we no longer recognize the face of God in one another? Have we so deeply entangled faith with identity, politics, and pride that we now raise weapons with one hand while holding scripture in the other? It breaks my heart to see prayers being answered with explosions, to hear sermons justifying hatred, to see sacred texts turned into tools of war rather than instruments of peace. I do not pretend to have answers. I do not know how to untangle thousands of years of history, trauma, prophecy, and pride. But I do believe this: if our faith leads us to destroy rather than to build, to condemn rather than to understand, then perhaps we are worshipping the idea of God but forgetting the essence of God. And so I continue to pray, not for victory, not for one side to win or the other to fall, but for awakening, for clarity, for the sacred humility to realize that beyond all our differences, we are still children of the same Creator. If one mother weeps, the world should pause. If one child dies afraid, all our temples should fall silent. That is the prayer I whisper into the darkness. That is the confession of this devotee. Part 1. Israel, the Land of the Covenant. If you've ever held the Old Testament in your hands, even if only to read the first few chapters, you will begin to sense a profound truth. To the Jewish people, Israel is not just a piece of land on the map. It is the beating heart of an entire people. It is memory. It is suffering. It is prayer, salvation, and an unbroken thread of faith stretching from one generation to the next. Israel did not begin in 1948. It began with a calling, a divine invitation extended to a man named Abraham. In the quiet of the desert, amid the vulnerability of human existence, Abraham heard a promise: "Leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation." That was the beginning of the covenant, a sacred agreement between heaven and humanity. God did not just promise blessings, he promised a land not defined by modern borders or satellite maps, but by spirit, a land where Abraham's descendants could live in communion with the divine. From that moment forward, every generation of Jews carried within them an invisible map, etched not in ink, but in the heart. Over the millennia, that land was lost, reclaimed, and lost again. The Jewish people were driven into exile, enslaved in Babylon, oppressed by Rome, scattered across the globe. But no matter where they went, Persia, Spain, Poland, Russia, Ethiopia, they carried with them one sacred memory: Zion. To them, Jerusalem was not merely a fallen capital, it was the soul of the Jewish spirit. Each time they prayed, they turned their faces eastward toward the sacred hill of Zion. And every year during Passover, they whispered the same ancestral phrase, "Next year in Jerusalem." It was not a metaphor, it was not a slogan, it was a vow, spoken through tears, whispered in hiding, shouted in defiance, a vow that bound generations together through longing, hope, and resilience. This yearning was only intensified by centuries of suffering. The Crusades, which saw thousands of Jews burned alive in their synagogues. The expulsion from Spain in 1492, where Jews were forced to convert or flee with nothing but their clothes. The pogroms of Eastern Europe, and ultimately the Holocaust, the industrialized slaughter of 6 million Jews. Yet through every shadow, the dream of return never faded. On the contrary, it blazed brighter. So when the modern state of Israel was established in 1948, it was more than a diplomatic victory or a geopolitical event. To countless Jews, especially within the religious community, it was seen as a spiritual resurrection, a sign that God had not forgotten his promise, a living proof that even after Auschwitz, the covenant still held firm. In this light, Israel is not just a country, it is a covenant made visible, a sacred trust made manifest, and therefore, for many Jews, defending the land is not merely an act of national security, but a holy duty, especially among religious Jews, ultra-Orthodox groups, spiritual, Zionists, and settler communities. Every inch of land is considered sacred, not because of oil or natural resources, but because every stone, every hill is part of the divine story. Each village and valley was walked by patriarchs and prophets. Every olive tree whispers scripture, and so any proposal to relinquish part of this land is not viewed as a political compromise. It is seen as a test of faith. If God granted this land, by what right do humans surrender it? This belief has led to the establishment of Jewish settlements in the West Bank, where some settlers see their presence as fulfilling God's plan. For them, building homes and cultivating land in disputed territories is not just political resistance, it is divine obedience. They believe the covenant will only be complete when the entire biblical land of Israel is restored to the Jewish people. Of course, not all Jews share this worldview. Israeli society is complex and diverse, ranging from secular liberals to devout mystics, from peace activists to religious nationalists. Still, in times of war and conflict, it is often the voice of faith that shapes national sentiment. In battles like the Six-Day War, Yom Kippur War, and the numerous clashes in Gaza, many see not just military strategy, but divine intervention. Victory is read as a sign of divine favor, defeat as a spiritual reckoning, a call to return to Torah, to holiness, to unity. Thus, Israel, small in geography, is immense in spiritual weight. It bears the weight of a story not yet finished, a story of faith, of sacrifice, of promises not yet fulfilled. It is a land where people do not merely live or die for territory. They live and die for meaning, for a connection to eternity. That is why, to so many Jews, Israel is not simply home. It is destiny. It is identity. It is the visible thread between their people and the God of Abraham. Part 2. Iran, awaiting the Mahdi and the mission of redemption. On the other side of the desert, beyond ancient mountains and sun-scorched plains of Mesopotamia, lies a nation no less shaped by sacred vision and spiritual yearning. Iran. Not merely an Islamic country, Iran is the heartland of Shiite Islam, a branch of the Muslim faith forged through centuries of bloodshed, sorrow, and an unshakable hope in divine justice. For the Shiite faithful, history is not just a record of the past. It is a chain of sacrifice, martyrdom, and devotion, each link drawing humanity closer to a long-promised future, a time when perfect justice will be established by the return of a hidden savior, Imam Mahdi, the 12th Imam. 1. The awaited Imam, hidden yet alive. In Shiite theology, Imam Mahdi is the final successor in a line of 12 spiritual leaders descending from Ali, the cousin and son-in-law of the Prophet Muhammad. According to Shiite belief, the 12th Imam, Muhammad ibn Hassan, did not die but entered occultation in the 9th century. His disappearance was not abandonment but a divine concealment, a purposeful absence within God's cosmic plan. From that moment, Shiites have believed that Imam Mahdi is still alive, still watching, still waiting in concealment. One day, at the end of time, he will reappear to bring an end to tyranny, crush all injustice, and usher in a reign of perfect peace and divine order. 2. Faith becomes ideology. For centuries, this belief remained a quiet hope, something cherished by individuals and small communities. But in the 20th century, under the leadership of Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, founder of the Islamic Republic of Iran, that hope was transformed into a revolutionary ideology. Khomeini was not only a scholar, but a visionary who fused theology with political action. He taught that waiting for the Mahdi should not be a passive act, it must be an active preparation. In Khomeini's view, the world would not automatically fall into justice. It required the faithful to rise against oppression, dismantle tyranny, and build a society worthy of the Mahdi's return. This vision was embodied in the doctrine of Velayat-e-Faqih, the guardianship of the jurist, wherein the supreme leader rules in place of the hidden imam until his reappearance. Under this doctrine, the Islamic Republic is not merely a government, it is a spiritual outpost, guarding the world through an age of darkness until the light returns. 3. Israel as a symbol of injustice. In this eschatological vision, Israel is not just a country. It becomes a symbol of global injustice, a manifestation of colonialism, of the oppression of Muslims, and particularly of the suffering of the Palestinian people. For Khomeini and his successor, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, Israel stands as a target of divine judgment, a regime that, in their belief, must be challenged if the world is ever to be purified. They argue that the Mahdi will not return to a world of quiet neutrality, but to a world torn apart by visible injustice. And thus, the mission of Iran is to expose that injustice, to fight it, and to purify the world in preparation for the coming of the Mahdi. From this view emerges the doctrine of sacred resistance, Muqawama al-Muqaddasa, wherein every act of defiance against Israel is elevated to a holy act. Financial, political, and military support for groups like Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and the Houthis in Yemen is not only geopolitics, it is part of the divine preparation for the end times. 4. When the Mahdi returns, what will you say to him? One of the most haunting questions repeated in Iranian sermons is this: when the Mahdi returns, will we be able to stand before him and say, "We fought for justice"? Or will we lower our heads in shame and confess, "We remained silent in the face of evil"? This is not merely an ethical question, it is a call to action. It embeds a theology of urgency. To be indifferent is to be complicit. To stay silent is to betray one's faith. From this lens, compromise becomes unacceptable. There can be no two states living in peace, no neutrality, no temporary ceasefire that forgets the larger cosmic narrative, because in this worldview, true peace only arrives when evil is entirely eradicated. 5. The Mahdi as a global redeemer. Uniquely, the Mahdi is not seen as merely a Shiite hero. In Shiite theology, when the Mahdi returns, he will not save only Muslims. He will establish a universal order of justice. He is not the protector of a single tribe or nation, but the breaker of all empires, the toppler of tyrants, and the silencer of hypocrisy. According to tradition, Mahdi will return alongside Jesus, Nabi Isa, who is revered in Islam as a prophet, and will return to break the cross of corruption and affirm divine truth. Together, they will dismantle falsehood, crush evil, and guide the world into a true era of peace, not by negotiation, but through cleansing and awakening. 6. Iran, nation or instrument of God. From this cosmic vantage point, Iran is not just a regional power. To the clerical elite, Iran is seen as a divine instrument, a torchbearer through the night. They believe Iran has a unique historical role to keep the flame alive until the Mahdi returns. Every act, every declaration, every missile, whether aimed at Tel Aviv or broadcast to the world, is not just a military gesture. It is part of a sacred timeline unfolding across history. And this is why the Iran-Israel conflict cannot be reduced to mere politics or rivalry. It is a clash of sacred visions, of competing covenants, of two nations who each believe they are fulfilling a divine calling. Part 3. When both sides believe they are the chosen ones. As a believer, one who belongs to neither Judaism nor Islam, I look upon this sacred land with a pain that is hard to name. Not only because bombs fall, not only because lifeless bodies lie beneath collapsed buildings. What torments me most is this: both sides truly believe they are doing what is right in the eyes of God. Israel believes it is the chosen people, the descendants of Abraham, recipients of a divine promise to inherit the Holy Land. Iran, especially the Shiite tradition at its core, believes it is paving the way for the return of the Mahdi, the hidden Imam, by resisting the forces of injustice which they believe Israel represents. Both sides carry a sacred fire within them. Both believe they are fulfilling a divine mission. And both look at the other, not with empathy, but with accusation, heretic, enemy of God, betrayer of truth. And I ask myself, what happens when two sacred flames rise at once, not to illuminate, but to consume? When two divine visions clash in the sky, lighting not a path to heaven, but a fire that leads to hell. 1. Mirror images, one faith, two paths. Both Israel and Iran carry within their collective memories a sacred story of chosenness. For Israel, it is the tale of a people led through the Red Sea, given the law at Sinai, and promised a holy land through a covenant with God. They see their survival after exile, pogroms, and the Holocaust as evidence that God remains faithful. For Iran and the Shiite tradition, they too believe they are the bearers of a divine trust. They recall centuries of persecution, the assassination of imams, the martyrdom at Karbala, where Hussein, the grandson of Prophet Muhammad, was killed while standing for justice. In Shiite consciousness, suffering is sacred purification, and resistance is loyalty to the divine. Two peoples, two faiths, two histories soaked in tears, and both believe they are the ones chosen to carry out God's will too. When faith becomes a weapon, the problem is not faith. True faith is light. The danger comes when faith is no longer a source of love, but becomes a weapon for exclusion. When people invoke God's name not to heal, but to dehumanize. In the language of extremists on both sides, the other is no longer fully human. They are infidels, devils, those who defy God's truth. And in such wars, death is no longer a tragedy. It is seen as divine punishment. Thus, faith becomes entangled with power, with national identity, with unhealed wounds. It no longer rises as prayer, but descends as firepower. 3. When God becomes a tool. I once read this: in war, the first casualty is not life, it is the image of the other as human. But in this spiritual war, I believe the first casualty is God Himself, because He never commanded us to hate. He never asked us to kill in His name. He never drew borders between us and them. God, in His essence, is without borders. He is the source of unconditional love. He breathes in both the believer and the unbeliever. And yet, today, we imprison Him within national borders, reduce Him to our version, and then invoke Him to justify our denial of one another. 4. When both pray but neither listens. There's something tragically ironic here. Both sides pray. Both sides recite scripture. Both have holy men, sacred books, temples, sermons, rituals, but no one seems to listen. No one hears the cry of the mother who lost her child on the other side. No one hears the scream of the child huddled in a shelter. No one hears the still small voice of God asking, "What are you doing in my name?" 5. If both are right, who is wrong? I once asked a monk, if both sides believe they're following God's will, who is right? He looked at me, paused, and said, "Perhaps both are right in faith, but both are wrong in love." That sentence has haunted me ever since, because it's true. Faith is not a license to kill. It is not a passport that exempts one from moral responsibility. If faith does not walk hand in hand with love, it becomes a more dangerous form of pride. 6. A question of God's image. I believe that every human being is born carrying a faint image of God. When we look into each other's eyes, regardless of religion, language, or color, we are seeing a reflection of the divine. But war, hatred, ideology, they blur that image. They make us stop seeing God in each other. And when someone is no longer human in our eyes, killing them becomes easy. And when killing becomes easy, we have not just killed the other, we have killed the part of God that lives within ourselves. 7. Praying for a faith that does not kill. I do not wish for a world without religion, but I dream of a world where religion never justifies death, where prayer never leads to missiles, where instead of asking, "Whose side is God on?" we ask, "Have I loved enough to be worthy of standing beside Him?" Part 4. Religion, a flame or a guiding light. People often say, religion is the cause of war. I've heard this phrase repeated countless times in the media, in debates, and even in the disillusioned whispers of former believers. But I don't believe that. I don't believe that religion, with all its scriptures, temples, and silent hours of prayer, is the origin of bullets and bombs. I don't believe that those who light candles in the night are the same ones who draw maps of war. I believe that religion does not cause war. It is people who distort religion, who use it as a mask to justify greed, hatred, or fear. 1. Religion, a source of light. Religion, in its most original meaning, is a bridge between the human and the transcendent. It is the longing for the sacred, for meaning, for something greater than death or suffering. Religion was born not to divide, but to heal, not to punish, but to forgive, not to burn, but to illuminate. I believe that if we brush away the dust of history, politics, doctrine, and power, we will rediscover at the heart of every religion a quiet flame. That flame is compassion, it is empathy, it is a whisper calling us back to our shared humanity. 2. The forgotten words. Let us revisit the sacred teachings of the world's great faiths. Judaism. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Leviticus 19:18. Islam. Whoever kills an innocent life, it is as if he has killed all of humanity. Quran 5:32. Christianity. Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Matthew 5:44. Buddhism. Victory breeds hatred. The defeated live in pain. Happily the peaceful live, giving up victory and defeat. Dhammapada, verse 201. Hinduism. The true sage sees himself in all beings and all beings in himself. Bhagavad Gita 6:29. And yet today these words are forgotten. They are drowned out by slogans, propaganda, and blind allegiance to names and flags. Religion, once a lamp to guide the lost, has been turned into a flame that consumes. It no longer warms the heart, it scorches the soul. 3. When people invoke God against God. What could be more heartbreaking than seeing people invoke the name of God to reject one another? In these conflicts, people are not only killed by bombs, but also by sacred condemnation. They are heretics. They are the enemies of God. They have no soul. Thus, people kill not only the body, but the image of God within the other. And once that image is erased, any violence becomes easy to justify. I once read a powerful line. When people stop seeing the image of God in each other, they begin killing each other in God's name. And I fear we are living in such an age. 4. When politics hijacks faith. Never before in modern history has religion been so thoroughly hijacked by politics. From theocracies to populist regimes, from extremist preachers to militant holy warriors, religion is now often a disguise for power. People don't approach God out of love, they approach him to justify their agendas. They do not live their faith, they exploit it. In this way, faith is no longer a sacred bridge, but a shield for the profane. 5. It is time to speak out. I believe the time has come when people of faith can no longer remain silent. We must oppose not only war, but also the distortion of religion. We must dare to say, to kill in the name of faith is the ultimate betrayal of that faith. We must reclaim religion from ideology. We must stand up not to attack anyone, but to protect the sacred light at the heart of every spiritual tradition. 6. We need a religion that heals. I do not dream of a world without religion. I dream of a world where religion is never used as a weapon, where people chant not to condemn but to forgive, where temples, churches, mosques and monasteries return to their truest purpose, to heal the wounds of humanity. We need a faith that knows how to cry when anyone dies, that listens to the moan of suffering, that bows before the pain of even its enemies. A faith that does not only speak of heaven after death, but one that guides us to live gently and justly here on earth. 7. A flame or a lamp, it's our choice. Religion by itself is neutral. It is like fire, it can cook a meal or destroy a home. It is like light, it can guide your path or blind another's eyes. The ultimate question is not, is religion right or wrong? It is, are we using religion as a lamp or as a flame? If you kneel to pray, ask yourself, does your prayer lead to compassion? If you preach, ask yourself, does your message bring peace? If you fight for what you believe is right, ask yourself, who are you fighting and for whom? Part 5. Faith must be healed. I don't know whether Israel and Iran can ever reconcile. I don't know whether peace is still possible beneath the layers of hatred, politics, historical wounds, and unspoken grief. But I do know this: God never wanted his children to kill one another. I don't need to be a religious scholar. I don't need to know the entire Torah, Quran, or any sacred text by heart to understand that. All I need is to look into the eyes of a grieving mother, a child orphaned by war, or a young soldier forced to hate strangers. And I know, war was never part of God's design. Hatred was never built into the architecture of love. 1. Religion is meant to connect, not divide. At its deepest core, religion was never meant to divide humanity into tribes. Religion is not a tool for drawing lines between us and them. It is not a passport to declare who is saved and who is condemned. Religion was created to connect human beings to the sacred, to connect us to each other through love, through humility, through compassion. If a belief system teaches me to close my heart, to view others with suspicion or fear, then that is not religion. It is a distortion of religion. True religion doesn't make me proud and rigid. It makes me soft and open. It doesn't make me speak louder about truth. It makes me listen more deeply to pain. 2. When prayer becomes a bridge, I believe prayer, if it is genuine, can become a bridge across the chasm of hatred. When I pray not only for myself, my family, or my nation, but for the one I once called enemy, then I am finally beginning to understand what religion truly is. Because forgiveness is the highest form of faith. Because to pray for someone who has hurt you is the most sacred act a soul can perform. It's easy to pray for those we love, easy to ask blessings for our people. But religion was never meant to teach the easy path. Religion teaches us the hardest truth of all, to love our enemies. 3. Faith can be wounded. True faith, like the human soul, can be wounded. When it is twisted to serve war, it breaks. When it is mixed with hatred, it loses its clarity. When faith is used as a weapon, it stops healing and starts to wound. That is why faith too must be healed, not with more sermons, not with grand rituals, but through a return to silence, to truth, to compassion. 4. Spirituality is not about exclusion. The deeper the faith, the greater the compassion. The more mature the spirituality, the less it excludes. Someone who truly knows God would never say, "He is only on our side." Someone who truly walks the sacred path would never ask, "Who is right?" Instead, they would ask, "Who is hurting, and what can I do to ease their pain?" Because salvation is not earned by declaring who is wrong. It is revealed in who we dare to love and how deeply we love them. 5. A place beyond labels. I believe there is a place, not on any map, but deep within the soul, where all labels dissolve. Where I am no longer Jewish, Muslim, Christian, Buddhist, or atheist. Where I am simply a human being trying to live with kindness, clarity, and care. In that place, we don't ask each other, "Who do you worship?" We ask, "Have you ever sat beside someone in their suffering?" We don't ask, "What is your religion?" We ask, "Have you ever truly forgiven someone?" 6. Peace begins. Not with leaders, but with the heart. I used to wait for peace summits. I used to hope for signed agreements, for presidents to shake hands. But I've come to understand peace does not descend from above. Peace rises from within. Peace does not begin with political declarations. Peace begins when one person prays for the one who hurt them. Peace begins when a child asks, "Why do we have to hate them?" and the adult has no answer. Peace begins when one heart dares to open even a little. 7. I don't know the future, but I know I will keep praying. I don't know if Israel and Iran will ever make peace. I don't know if people can let go of their pain, their ancestral wounds, their sacred anger. I don't even know if God is weeping or remaining silent in all this, but I do know this: each night I will keep praying. I will pray for the child across the border, even if I never know their name. I will pray for the grieving mother, even if she speaks a language I don't understand. I will pray for the soldier, confused, torn between orders and conscience. And I will pray for myself that I never become numb to suffering, that I never forget. I too am human. Final call to the heart. If you've stayed with me this far, if you've walked alongside these stories of pain and faith, if your heart paused even for a moment, then perhaps something deep within you has stirred. Not outrage, not the satisfaction of being right or on the winning side, but something far more sacred, a shared sorrow, a sorrow that transcends flags, borders, languages, and doctrines, a sorrow simply called humanity. I'm not asking you to become an activist. I'm not asking you to take sides, debate, or defend anything. I'm only asking you to be still for a moment and place your hand over your heart. Feel its rhythm. It beats just like the hearts of others across the world, just like the child you've never met, just like the grieving mother whose name you'll never know. We all have hearts, and we all deserve to live in love. If somewhere inside you there is the faintest tremble, a tear that hasn't yet fallen, a prayer that hasn't yet been spoken, please share this video. Not for politics, not to prove a point, not to argue or convince, but for peace, for the kind of peace that begins within. Peace of the soul, peace of the spirit, peace in the way we see one another. Let these words, these stories travel beyond the noise of conflict. Let them reach the quiet places inside us all, that sacred space where we still remember. Religion was never meant to divide us, but to heal us, not to build walls, but to open doors, not to make us right, but to make us more deeply human. And if you believe that, even just a little, then help this message be heard. We don't need millions of views. We only need one heart that truly listens, because from hearts like that, a new world can begin.